There are no guarantees, only action and faith. Let that sink in. No guarantees. No promises. No perfect timing. No magic signs. Just you. Your decision. Your movement. You're waiting for certainty. But life doesn't work like that. You want proof before you leap. But the proof comes after the leap. The truth is, no one's coming to save you. No one's going to hand you the dream. You either build it, or you don't. And yes, it's risky. It's uncomfortable. It's terrifying to move without knowing. But that's where power lives. Not in the guarantee, but in the faith. Faith that your action matters. Faith that your steps are not wasted. Faith that the unseen is working in your favor. Every successful person you admire. They acted before the plan was perfect. They moved before they felt ready. They believed when they had every reason not to. Because success doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with courage. It begins with action. It begins with faith. So here's the truth. You don't need a sign. You don't need another plan. You don't need anyone's permission. You need to trust. You need to move. You need to believe. Even when nothing around you gives you a reason to. There are no guarantees in this life. Only action. And faith. And that is more than enough. We're taught to wait. To be cautious. To make sure it's safe. Before we act. But the truth is, the longer you wait for certainty, the further you drift from your potential. Faith isn't just some fluffy idea. It's not wishful thinking. It's a force. A vibration. A decision to move even when nothing makes sense yet. Because you make it make sense by moving. Everything in your life right now. Everything you see. Everything you touch. Came from someone's decision to act without a guarantee. Every business. Every invention. Every success story. Started with a risk. Someone chose to leap. Without knowing the outcome. And that's what separates the dreamers from the doers. The people who live. From the people who merely exist. You see, the universe responds to boldness. To clarity. To action that's backed by belief. It doesn't reward hesitation. It doesn't respond to fear. It expands in direct proportion to your faith. You want something big? You've got to become someone bold. That dream you're holding on to. It's not going to knock on your door. It's waiting for you to rise to the level where it can meet you. And that level? It requires courage. Because when you take the risk, when you trust without proof, you change the frequency of who you are. You become magnetic. You attract new doors, new people, new opportunities. Not because it's luck, but because you dared to believe before you saw the evidence. You don't get to avoid the unknown. You grow through it. You become through it. Every time you act in faith, you send a signal. To your mind. To your spirit. To the universe itself. I'm ready. I trust. I will not be ruled by fear. And in that moment, something shifts. You go from hoping to creating. From surviving to thriving. From dreaming to becoming. That's what this journey is really about. Not avoiding failure, but walking through it with your head high. Not clinging to comfort, but trading it for growth. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, you'll doubt yourself. Yes, you'll fall. But on the other side of that fall is the version of you that was always meant to rise. And you won't find that version by playing small, by playing safe, by waiting for everything to be perfect. You'll find it in the fire, in the leap, in the space where all you have is faith. So stop asking for a guarantee. Stop waiting for the fear to disappear. It won't. Do it anyway. Because the life you want, the freedom you crave, the power within you, it's all activated by one thing: action fueled by belief. Everything changes when you finally decide to trust yourself. Think about Thomas Edison. He failed over 1,000 times trying to invent the light bulb. Most people would have quit at 10, maybe 50. 100 failures? That's insanity to the average mind. But Edison didn't need a guarantee. He had vision. He had belief. He had the faith to keep moving failure after failure without knowing if it would ever work. And it did. Because faith combined with relentless action always finds a way. That light in your room? That came from a man who refused to wait for certainty. Look at Oprah Winfrey. She was born into poverty. Abused as a child. Told she'd never make it in television. She didn't have a safety net. She didn't have powerful connections. But she believed. In herself. In her message. In something greater. She stepped out without proof. And built a legacy that touched the world. Not because the road was easy, but because she kept walking it anyway. Success doesn't start with privilege. It starts with a decision. A decision to move when it's uncomfortable. To show up when you're scared. To speak when your voice shakes. Every great story has a chapter where the hero almost gave up. Where nothing made sense. Where quitting looked easier. But they didn't quit. They leaned into the unknown. And the unknown rewarded them. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper job. They said he lacked imagination. Imagine that. He went bankrupt. He was rejected by banks over and over again. But he kept drawing. Kept dreaming. Kept believing in a world that didn't exist yet, except in his mind. And that vision? It became Disneyland. It became a global empire. Not because someone promised him success, but because he promised himself he wouldn't stop. That's what separates the few who rise from the many who stay stuck. They act in the face of doubt. They trust their gut, not the statistics. They bet on themselves when no one else would. You want a life that's extraordinary? You'll have to be bold. You'll have to risk being misunderstood. You'll have to walk alone sometimes. You'll have to keep moving even when no one claps. Because the applause comes after the courage. Not before. There are no straight lines. No perfect plans. Just faith. And action. Over and over again. And slowly. The invisible becomes visible. The dream becomes real. The impossible becomes inevitable. Steve Jobs once said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward." That's what faith is. Taking steps into the dark. Trusting the light will meet you halfway. Not because you know the outcome, but because you know who you are. You were not made for hesitation. You were not built for doubt. You were born to create. To build. To believe so deeply that the world has no choice but to follow. So look around. Every invention. Every business. Every movement that changed history. It started the same way. With someone who had no guarantee. But stepped forward anyway. That someone can be you. Right now. If you choose to move. If you choose to believe. If you choose faith over fear. So here you are. Standing at the edge. Looking out over everything you could become. But it's not going to wait for you. Life doesn't pause. Opportunity doesn't beg. The door doesn't open unless you knock, and keep knocking. You don't need more time. You don't need more approval. You don't need every step mapped out. What you need is to move, to leap, to decide that right now, you are done playing small. Done doubting. Done delaying. Done giving your power away to fear. Because fear is a liar. It whispers worst-case scenarios, but hides the truth. You are always capable. You are always ready. You are always more powerful than you believed. And deep down, you know it. You felt that pull. That inner fire. That quiet voice saying, "This isn't all there is, there's more for you." And there is. But you won't find it by standing still. You won't discover it by waiting. You'll only find it by becoming the person who dares. Dares to believe before the breakthrough. Dares to act before the outcome. Dares to trust without the guarantee. Because that's where the magic is. Not in control, but in surrender. Not in comfort, but in courage. Listen. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. Then another. And another. Each one will build you. Shape you. Transform you. Not just into someone who has a dream, but someone who lives it. You've got one life. One shot. One chance to rise. So what are you waiting for? Take the risk. Bet on yourself. Walk into the unknown with your head high and your heart wide open. Don't wait for the fear to go away, bring it with you. Don't wait for the perfect plan, build it as you go. The universe moves when you do. Doors open when you knock. Paths appear when you walk. But none of it happens until you decide. So decide. Right here. Right now. Say yes to your vision. Say yes to your next level. Say yes to the version of you that's been waiting not for more time, but for your permission. Dare. Dare to believe when there's no proof. Dare to act when it's uncomfortable. Dare to trust the process even when you don't understand it. Because nothing extraordinary comes from waiting. It comes from faith. It comes from fire. It comes from movement. So here's the call. Rise. Stand up. Step forward. Be bold enough to live the life you were born for. There are no guarantees, only action. And faith. And that is all you'll ever need.